There's a difference of opinion about the last word of the 12th blessing of the Amidah. The blessing begins, Minim Minim, or an older version is, Minim. According to many sources, the last word of this blessing is Zedim, but according to some sources, the last word of this blessing is Minim. The blessing is a prayer to destroy our enemies and to subdue wicked people. Zedim means evil people, while Minim means heretics. All of the early sources have Zedim. Zedim is what is found in the Talmud Yerushalmi, in the Siddur of Rab Amram Gaon in the 9th century, and in the Siddur of Rab Saadia Gaon in the 10th century. Harambam has Zedim in his prayer text in Mishneh Torah. Furthermore, in the Yalkut Shim'oni, a midrash that was compiled in approximately the 13th century, and in another midrash quoted by Maran in the Beit Yosef, the blessing concludes with Zedim. However, in the 18th century, the Haidah wrote that the final word of this blessing should be Minim. He explained that since the blessing begins with Minim, and the beginning of a blessing and the conclusion of a blessing should be similar, the last word of this blessing should be Minim. He also supported his opinion with what he found in some Siddurim, including a Siddur based on the teachings of the Arizal that was printed in Ukraine. What was the custom in Halab? The earliest source for Halab is Mahzor Aram Sobah, which was printed in the year 1527, and that has Zedim. In the 19th century, Hakam Abraham Hamwi's Mahzor for Rosh Hashanah, which he called Beit Din, has Zedim in the Amidah for Som Gedaliah. However, this is not necessarily a reflection of the custom of Halab at that time, since his Mahzor was not made specifically for the Jews of Halab, and in general, he followed the textual version of the Siddurim printed in Livorno in the 19th century. On the other hand, Siddurim printed in Livorno were popular in Halab in the 19th century, and certainly had an impact on the accepted prayer texts in Halab at that time. Interestingly, the 19th century Siddur Bet Obed, which was printed in Livorno and was popular in Halab, has Zedim, followed by the word Minim in parentheses, and after the word Minim it says, V'chen Ikar, which means that is the main or more correct opinion. In Halab, Hakam Yeshaya Dayan, an important authority in the 19th century, wrote a short responsa regarding whether to say Zedim or Minim. In his opinion, Zedim is more correct. In his responsa, he does not mention what the custom of Halab was at that time. Perhaps he wrote the responsa because the custom of Halab at that time was not clear. This responsa was printed in the book Ginzei Aretz, a collection of writings by various Halabi rabbis. In the Siddur Olat HaShahar, which was printed in Halab in 1915, it has Minim, and Hakam Ishaq Shahebar, who was born in Halab in 1912, wrote that the custom of Halab is to say Minim in accordance with the opinion of the Haidah. He wrote this in his book, Yishak Yeranen. But in the book, Derech Eretz, it says that the custom of Halab was to say Zedim. And Derech Eretz wrote this based on what he heard from Hakam Nisim Za'afrani and Hakam Abraham Dweck, who both lived in Halab in the 20th century. So the original custom was to say Zedim, but since the 19th century, some switched to Minim based on the opinion of the Haidah. The Siddur Tefilat Yeshurun, which was very popular in the community in Brooklyn from the 1930s until the 1960s, also had Minim. But even in the 19th and 20th centuries, many maintained the original custom of saying Zedim, as we saw in the responsa of Hakam Yeshaya Dayan and other relatively recent sources, including the book Derech Eretz.